The mid-size SUV space has been a favorite in the Indian car market. And while there are formidable players in this segment, now Volkswagen is ready with its much-awaited, much-talked-about Taigun SUV. We're driving both the Taigun SUVs here. One is with the manual transmission, the other is with that 7-speed DSG, and we're taking a closer, in-depth look at everything, right from how it looks to how it drives and everything in the middle. This is HT Auto. I'm Shubhadeep. Stay tuned. Now, it's very important, especially in the mid-size SUV space, to see how a car looks. And as far as the external appearance of the vehicle is concerned, this particular one, Volkswagen have done a good balancing act. Now, why do I say that? Company officials tell us, and we agree with them, that if you remove the VW badge from here, you can still instantly recognize this car as a VW. Now that's primarily because of the grille here that's up at the front. It's redesigned, but it's still very typically VW, looks very elegantly smart. It has these elongated rectangular headlight units. These are LED headlights and LED DRLs. The one behind me has LED DRLs but halogen headlights. There are really strong body characters on the bonnet here, so it gives that sense of muscular appeal to the vehicle, which otherwise has a very elegant and sporty appearance from the front. Now, on the side, the things are not very creative. The wheelbase is pretty good. In fact, the wheelbase of the Taigun and the Kushaq are similar, are same. The Taigun sits on 16-inch alloy wheels. The alloy designs are also different between the two cars. Now remember, both of these vehicles are GT variants, so there is a whole lot of chrome that's being used as well. There is chrome here and a bit of chrome here on the side and on the window line as well. There's a chrome strip on the door handles as well. But the most important and creative aspect of how this car looks is at the rear. The LED tail lights give the car a very, very modern appeal, and the infinity LED tail lights, which by the way are not brake lights, really improve the look of the Taigun SUV. There's also addition of chrome on the lower belt line, and the Taigun badge itself is in a font that suits the profile of the vehicle. The Taigun also comes with roof rails, and yes, for anybody who's interested, these roof rails are functional. We've seen that in play with the cycle being mounted on top. We're not very sure what's the weight that it can support, but the fact that these are functional roof rails is a great thing. Now the proof of the pudding, of course, is how comfortable is this car on the inside. So we'll start with the cabin talk from right here in the back seat. This is what we did for the Kushaq as well. And once you step inside the Taigun, you are reminded of the Kushaq if you've been inside one. Starting with the typical VW group thud of the door. The quality seems right up there. But let me just begin by pointing out one obvious con of this vehicle. Now the feet, my feet here are extremely restricted. That's because of the rails on which the front seat is on. That's true for the passenger seat here as well. So there are large rails on which these seats sit on and restrict feet movement. That said, the driving seat here is positioned to how I like it, and believe me, despite the fact that this seat is pulled quite far back, there is a whole lot of knee room for me. Under-thigh support is adequate, and headroom is also just about adequate. There is this central armrest if there are two passengers at the back, so this is great. Pretty much what you would expect in a car of this segment. The cushioning on the seats and the way they've been designed, this white element here with the red stitching, it's also quite premium. Now what is not so premium is, well, the use of plastics all around. The window isn't the biggest that I've seen, and The seats, even the back pocket flaps are, well, just about okay. Now again, moving back to a positive, the central armrest does not jut back all that much, so the passenger in the middle won't really complain about lack of leg space. Now there are also two Type-C USB charging ports. So overall, the back angle is also pretty good, so I believe that long journeys on the back seat won't be a problem. I'm not very sure about how comfortable 3 abreast would be in this car, but 2 definitely would be quite okay in the back seat of the Taigun. The overall feel of the vehicle is, well, pretty good. It's what VW aspires for in its vehicles. Now it's time to take a look at what's on offer on the front seats, and remember, there are subtle differences between the automatic and the one that we are focusing now, the manual. So let's take a look at how the manual transmission's interiors are. Now the Taigun is being offered in 5 exterior color options, but why do I mention that while getting into these front seats? Well, that's because this one right here is in the red color, and that's not just in the exterior color theme outside, but on the inside as well. Just take a look at all the red that's on display. Very frankly, it can be a matter of opinion, but I am not very impressed with how this whole layout is, because it's very jarring to my senses, at least, to have so much of these plastics in red all around this vehicle. So there is on the central dash, there is the same red here as well. So while it can be a matter of opinion, I'm not too taken by it. What I am impressed with is the really big 10-inch main infotainment screen right here. You can use this to control a host of apps. You can use navigation. There is support for wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Besides that, you also get driving statistics right here and notifications, and the apps currently available, much like the Kushaq, are the audiobook and the rest remaining ones here. Now another thing is this 8-inch driver display. On this manual version, you get a semi-digital one. On the automatic variant, and we'll come to that in just a bit, it's a fully digital instrument cluster. But there's nothing much to report here as far as the semi-digital cluster is concerned. The steering wheel, though, can be adjusted for rake and reach. There is no sunroof on the manual version, so keep that in mind as well. There is one on the automatic. And overall, you do get support for wireless phone charging. You get Type-C USB ports right here for charging as well. There are a host of these spaces for your bottles. Storage space also extends to the doors as well. The driving position in itself, well, you can adjust it for height. Everything is manual though, but it is offering a decent view of the road. It is not too high up, so you won't really feel like you are in one of the most formidable SUVs, but it is par for the course. Now, as I mentioned, there are differences between this car and that car right there, and not just in the transmission, but also in terms of how the exterior elements here and there are different. It's also, as I mentioned, inside this car as well. The most prominent one is that this car right here gets the engine start-stop, and it's got one of the favorites in the Indian market, which is, well, a sunroof. The sunroof isn't the largest in its segment, but the fact that VW is putting in a sunroof in its car shows that VW is really interested in wooing and wowing Indian customers. Another thing that the automatic transmission car has is, as I mentioned, a completely digital display. In fact, the driver display is very modern, it's very sleek, it's very futuristic, and everything is very legible as well. Now the good thing is that the color here on the center console and on the dash, at least in this one, is a lot more pleasing to the eyes. It's not as flashy and jarring as the red that I just showed you. But on the flip side, certain things are completely missing from the Taigun, certain features. So for example, the front seats are not ventilated. The glove box is large, but it's not a cooled glove box. And these few elements, I think, would have made it even more competitive against some of its rivals. That said, this car is well appointed. It has that nice driver display. The ride height, as I mentioned, is fantastic. So VW has definitely stepped up and delivered on a lot many counts. But what is this car like when on the move? Let's find out. So first up is this car right here. It's the 1.5 litre TSI petrol engine, of course, but this one's got the 7-speed DSG transmission box. And we've been driving this one for some time now, and immediately the pros and the cons are very evident. So before I get to the good, let's talk a little bit about what I didn't like. Now, in terms of what I didn't like is the fact that there is a little bit of grunt from the engine when you are trying to push the Taigun really hard. So pedal to the metal, and there is that little bit of grunt, there is that little bit of reluctance which you won't find in some of its Korean rivals. That is a little minuscule, you will notice it, but what's not minuscule though is the body roll that is in the cars, especially if you are taking sharp turns at relatively high speeds. In the front seats, you will definitely experience body roll, and that's something we would advise you to take note of if and when you go to take a test drive of the Taigun. But on the good side, and yes, there are a lot of pros in this vehicle right here. Taigun may be a new product, but it's inherently a VW. What that means is the steering right here is really nicely weighted. Now, again, if you compare it to some of its Korean rivals, the weight, the heft, the clout of the steering wheel, especially at high speeds, is definitely a great thing. But even if you don't compare it to the Koreans, this car is, the steering wheel is nice, flexible and springy enough for you to be taking sharp turns, and it evokes that sense of confidence that's, well, very typically VW. Also, a thumbs up to the DSG transmission box here. It is really effortless. The gear shifts are very precise, and you won't even notice the numbers changing either up or down in this vehicle. So that's a good job done. The 1.5 litre petrol engine is also pretty good, so it is a thumbs up on that count as well. Whether you're driving in city conditions or like I am right now on open highway roads, it performs on expected lines. Yes, there is that grunt that I spoke about when you're pushing the car, but as long as you're not really looking for the most enthusiastic drive, the Taigun will satiate and satisfy all your driving needs and desires. Now, the suspension setup on the Taigun, to me, seems like it's a bit more on the harder side. So it does a great job of gobbling up most of the speed bumps, but I would have perhaps still preferred it to be somewhere in the middle. But right now, it to me seems like it's leaning on the harder side. Now, I'm really nitpicking here, I admit, but that's something again that is quite noticeable, quite evident. Now, just in case you want that exhilarating drive experience, then you also have the paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. So that's a good addition for somebody who's buying into a VW and is an enthusiast, can always make use of the paddle shifters to get the performance he or she desires. We've made the swap between the automatic and the manual transmission. So inside this car is this 6-speed manual transmission. There are subtle changes between the two cars as well. There is no engine start-stop here. It's a regular key to turn. But yes, the biggest difference, of course, is in the transmission. Now, while the 7-speed DSG is phenomenal, the 6-speed manual transmission is just above par for the course. In fact, the little that I've driven this car, it is very evident that it has a nice throw. In fact, the third gear has a really nice, big, large range. So you won't really have to downshift all that much, and that's great. But what we did feel is that on hilly roads, when you're trying to make the climb, the effort to get a move on is a bit on the higher side. Now, this is something that we even mentioned in the Kushaq. We were driving the manual transmission unit. Just felt like the need to downshift in that car and also in this car is a little on the higher side. But on regular roads, absolutely no complaints with this transmission unit. Volkswagen has its priorities clearly spelled out with the Taigun SUV. It's not the flashiest of cars in the market, and yet it's one of the most elegant mid-size SUVs that you can buy. But would you actually buy it for the looks, or the drive, because the 1.5 litre TSI engine is quite good, and the DSG as well as manual transmission really improve the driving dynamics of the vehicle as well. We strongly recommend that you take a test drive of this vehicle if you're in the market for a new mid-size SUV. But for now, this is all that we have. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned to HT Auto for more such reviews.